Hello and welcome to the Evolve Pipedrive podcast, where we talk about everything to do with Pipedrive, sales, apps, and the Pipedrive marketplace. This week I'm joined by my business partner Aaron, CEO, technical director here at Evolve, and we're going to be talking about Pipedrive Workflow Automation. Note, this is not about Pipedrive integrations and automation with other apps. We'll do that in another episode. So, Aaron, let's start with the basics. What is Pipedrive Workflow Automation?
So in its simplest version, workflow automation in Pipedrive allows you to automate manual processes. So it works using triggers and then conditions, which are like filters, and then finally actions. So based on an action you take in Pipedrive, you can then trigger another set of actions, such as like moving a deal, setting an activity, sending out an email.
Okay, so you said a couple of things there, right? So triggers and activities, or triggers and actions, I think you actually used. So give me some examples of a trigger in Pipedrive.
Yeah, so a trigger basically is what starts off the process, right? We don't want it to start unless this thing happens. And that could be something like a new contact, lead, or a deal is created in your Pipedrive account, or a deal is moved into another stage of the pipeline, or an activity, for example, is marked as completed. It could even be like, a data field in your Pipedrive account has been filled in or has been changed. And this is where it gets a touch more complex, but you can use a filter. And this is quite interesting where you can take things a bit further, but you could use a filter that you set up in Pipedrive. And when a lead, a deal, or a contact met the conditions of that filter, that then triggers an automation to happen.
Got you. Okay, so, and what about an action? What would an action be in Pipedrive then?
Yeah, so there's quite a few now, actually. They're adding more and more, but actions could be things like creating a new lead, a deal, or a contact. We can send emails from templates or just, type one in. We can create activities, so like tasks and reminders. We can even change details within the CRM, such as in a lead, a deal, or a contact, go and change one of the data fields or update it. We can move a deal to another stage of the pipeline or a different pipeline altogether. We could add some products to a deal. We could potentially change the owner of a deal to someone else in your team. Or we could change a label, or say, for example, going from cold to warm because of a certain action that's been taken in the CRM. And those are just examples. There's a lot more you can do with it than that.
No, I've seen quite a few things, right? So I know some of our listeners, all of you out there, some of you actually run businesses, right? So, and some of our clients listen to this. So what are some real world examples of how these work?
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to go with a basic one to start with, an initial example, and we might have some more complex ones later. But just in a real life terms scenario here, let's say a new deal is created because somebody filled out the inquiry form on your website. This is the trigger of the automation. Now you might use Pipedrive web forms. So that's been filled in, a new deal is created, this triggers an automation, you want something to happen straight away. So the next step sends that contact an email, thanking them for their inquiry, and then promise them the callback within the next 24 hours. So in order to make sure that callback actually happens, the automation also sets an activity for a sales rep to remind that rep to call the new contact regarding that inquiry. So what you've done is, replied to them immediately, but also said, there's an activity in for somebody to give them a call and keep it timely.
And how much time do you think that would save?
So for this one, if you were doing those processes, depends, some people are faster, some people are slower, things like this. But for this one, I would say you're talking about 10 to 15 minutes. But the main benefit here is that your customer has received an immediate response. So we have saved them time, but it's more about actually there's an immediate response. You're proactive. They can see they know that you've received their inquiry. And you also then know that the sales rep won't forget to call them back within the 24 hours that you've promised. So you're just keeping things really, really tight. But of course, you are saving some time. Depending on how many inquiries you get per day, depends, how much time that's actually going to save you in a day.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, we certainly see that ourselves, right? But tell me, can you... That gets really powerful. So is that just for one, or can you kind of stack these automations up? How could to save loads of time?
Yeah, and this is how you will save loads of time. So the more automations you build, the more time you're going to save. So a little example might be if you created, let's say, 6 automations And each one of those would normally take you 10 minutes to do. And you would normally do each of those things 4 times in a day, which isn't much. You've actually just saved 4 hours of work per day. I mean, that's crazy. That's half a day saved by those automations running. And those are conservative numbers in terms of how many times you might do them and things like this. So if you then had 5 reps in your business, 5 sales reps, that's 80 hours a week saved.
Well, I mean, we've seen some examples where that's people say they're saving salaries, with these types of automations, right? So I didn't know. Just it's all kind of the stacking of these automations. It's really, really impressive. So are they easy to set up?
Yeah, Pipedrive is easy. Everything in Pipedrive is easy. So they are very, very easy to set up. There is a whole bunch of kind of handy template automations you can use. They're quite good to get started or to do things that, apply to everybody. You can then create your own custom ones once you get a bit more used to those. Once you get the hang of triggers, filters, and conditions, building them is easy. You know what you want to achieve. The only tricky part around really getting the most out of workflow automation is the actual conceptual design of them, coming up with the ideas and then thinking about how you can actually do that using the data, the triggers, the actions, getting that concept actually into motion in Pipedrive. That's the only tricky bit of it, but actually working within the system is really, really super easy.
As opposed to saying, I want to automate my business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the best automation that you've seen?
That's a great question. So actually, Pipedrive just launched a new feature of the workflow automation, and this is a complete game changer. And this feature is delay steps. So what that means is, whilst we could have an action, a trigger, so deal moves to this stage, and then complete this action, send an email. What we can now say is, when that deal moves into that stage, wait a few days, then send an email, and then wait a few more days and send another email. And you can continue that as long as you like. So with using that delay step, we can now do some quite complex things. We've just built a full sequence of 10 follow-up emails, basically helping out a really, really busy sales team with their post-proposal follow-ups. So they're sending out a proposal, and we all know the real pain is thinking that maybe your sales reps aren't following up once they've sent a proposal well enough. They're kind of straight on to the next deal, and it's quite hard and expensive even to get a deal all the way through to a proposal. A lot of work's gone in there. You might be down to maybe 20% of your original inbound leads actually get through to a proposal. And so it's horrible to think that they haven't been followed up well enough or timely enough, and that you've lost that deal to a competitor because simply it sat there for a few days and someone forgot to follow up. So we went and said, okay, let's automate that. And so basically the emails go out on day 1, day 3, and day 7 to follow up on that proposal. Did you receive it? What did you think of it? I haven't heard from you, these kind of things. And then it goes weekly thereafter for 10 weeks or for another 7 weeks. And then what we've then done is interspersed activities set by the automation as well. And this is for the sales rep to actually make phone calls. So they're getting reminders, and they'll get a notification in their inbox in the morning from Pipedrive notifications to say, you need to make this call today. It can be synced with their calendar so they can see all the calls they've got to make. And if they're a good sales rep, they'll be working through their activities in Pipedrive. And so these sales calls are getting interspersed with the emails that are going out. In terms of increasing the likelihood of winning that proposal that's just been sent, we've enormously improved the chances and therefore increased the conversion rate. So let's say you've got 25 proposals going out per rep per week, and that's 10 reps, so 250 proposals. And you can think now each of those are getting 10 emails over 10 weeks. I mean, this is huge quantities of assistance alongside all those activities for all those calls. And automation has sped this all up enormously. But it's important to say this isn't just about doing it manually for somebody or sort of doing it automatically for somebody. This is also about guaranteeing it gets done and gets done when you want it to consistently. So, a lot of people think about automation as just saving time. It's not. It's about, like I say, consistency and making sure these things actually get done.
Yeah,
so
being more effective as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited to see how this one plays out, actually, and what sort of difference in conversion rate we see. Another factor to this is that we're actually A/B testing the sequence cadence and the content to see what the best performing version of this particular automation might be. So we've set it up several times. We've switched around the content, this email first or that email first, this call at this date and this call at that day. And so it's going to be really interesting over the next few months to see what's working best and what isn't, make adjustments and keep tweaking until it's perfected.
Yeah, I like it. So the scary bit there would be, how do you stop that? How do you stop an automation running?
Yeah, so this is a common thing that goes wrong, actually, is that people forget to think about, how do you stop it, or when do you not want an automation to run? Because automations, they don't choose, they just go. So there are cases, of course, and you should think about when you build an automation, when do I not want this to go? And how do I make sure it doesn't go when I don't want it to? So in this case, we've configured the automation to stop when the deal moves to the next stage of the pipeline. But we've also sort of added a button to cancel the automation, which is basically a label that if the rep goes in and sets the label on the deal to stop automation, the automation will no longer run anymore. And that might be the case where actually you've had a really good phone call with them. It hasn't progressed to the next stage of the pipeline, but they've said, look, I'm waiting for something here. It's going to take me a week and I'll come back to you. So you don't want another email to go out saying, why haven't you come back to us? Because they've asked you to wait. So it's more about, okay, then we'll set an activity manually to make sure we follow up on the 7th day, as discussed with the client. So that's a really, really important consideration, is when should we stop these automations?
Right, makes sense. So could this be then used for email outreach?
Yeah, absolutely. As in sales email outreach in early kind of lead gen and things, that's the exciting thing here. You could use this to warm up your leads in the leads inbox, let's say. So, let's say we got some new contacts, some new prospects, we drop them into the leads inbox. And then these automations run, sending out a sequence of emails, maybe alongside activities for calls, activities for, go and connect with this person on LinkedIn and things like this. But if you're sending these automated emails, we could then track the opens and clicks. And then we'll get a notification through Pipedrive to say that, they've clicked the link in the email we've sent from this automation. And then we'll stop the automation, convert the lead to a deal, and start having a proper conversation with that prospect because they've engaged. So this is really, really exciting. It moves, Pipedrive from just managing what comes in or what's going on to actually there's a bit of outreach going on now, automation.
Yeah, like a proper sales engagement tool. Like you're empowering the salesperson there, right? And it sounds amazing. So then they can be the sharp end of that spear and actually get involved when best use of their time, right? Is there anything? So is it as good as it could be? Like, could it be better? Like, what's missing there?
Of course, it could always be better. There's always more. It's not Zapier. But actually, I must say, in terms of comparison to Zapier, this is much easier to use, and it sits within your Pipedrive account. You're not creating zaps that just don't work or they fail or things like this. It works every time. It's very solid. It's very simple. It's very easy to use. Anyone can do it. But Pipedrive are constantly improving. We're seeing new functions and releases of this coming out all the time. That said, one thing would be really great to see is the email open or link click as a trigger. And that takes the email outreach we were just talking about a step further. So we've got a sequence of emails that goes out. Once somebody actually clicks a link in an email, for example, or they open it, we trigger a different automation, which might, set a phone call activity or create a deal or what have you. And then actually we're moving into automated outreach campaigns. And this is a really exciting place to be. The other thing I might say is a lookup step. This is something you see in Zapier, and it's, I use in almost all my apps, is we need the ability to look up some additional data after the trigger. We're getting a bit complex here, but, so trigger happens. We want to look up a person or an organization, find some data about them, and then use it in an action step or in a condition. So a couple of things there, and there's more, but actually I would say, the latest, and this it's actually in beta at the moment, but these delay steps is an absolute game changer and an enormous improvement. So
yeah, and that's so. Yeah, so to be clear, it's not Zapier. This is Pipedrive Workflow Automation. So there are some really cool things you can do in app. So yeah, how far can you take it though? Like, how far could you take that?
I think so. On one hand, it's as far as your imagination can go, but there are some limitations, of course. You'll find as you go, and they can be quite frustrating. And occasionally, that is when you defer to Zapier or you to speak to a consultant. But I've got an example here, actually, of what I feel like is the potential, and it's an example of one thing you might try and get the automation to do for you.
Yeah.
And that's a sort of preliminary qualification process. So let's say you put some new data into your database. Let's say you put a couple of hundred contacts in, and you've got some good data behind those contacts. And what we're then doing actually is the workflow automation is going to qualify that data and kind of sort it. So let's say you've got in that data set, you've got company size, you've got what level of authority that person is. Are they C-level, director, manager, etc.? And you've got some qualitative data within it. What Pipedrive can then do is actually filter through that data and then take an action based on what it finds. And this is totally possible, and it's not even that difficult to build. Like I said earlier, if you can conceptualize it properly in the first place. Now, what it might do is say, okay, anyone who's C-level for a company that's turns over more than 20 million, with more than 500 employees, who's based in the UK, create a lead, set an activity, and send a template introductory email with a brochure. However, anybody less than that, keep them as a contact. Whereas if it finds some really high-end data in there that looks really, really good, it could elevate or escalate that lead to your senior salesperson, for example, and schedule a call for them. But also in that email, you could then say, actually, you could include your Calendly link, or actually use the Pipedrive scheduler, which is very similar to Calendly, to say, would you like to actually schedule an appointment with me? And this is all automated. So if you can get this working really well, and it sends out a certain amount per day, you actually could genuinely look to just chuck data in the CRM and see, scheduled appointments coming out the back of it automatically. That's really exciting. And I think that all of that's possible, and you can take it that far if you can conceptualize it and then spend a bit of time building it.
Without touching a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So any top tips, like Pipedrive top tips there on workflow automation? What would you say? I want to get more top tips from you and maybe the rest of the team at some point, but I'm always going to be asking for these Pipedrive top tips.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So first thing is start with the templates that are in Pipedrive.
Yeah.
Have a go with those. Call them practice if you like. We see so many people jump in, build 10 automations, and then all sorts of weird things are happening across their Pipedrive account, and they don't really know why or which one's causing the problem. And they end up switching the whole lot off again.
Yeah.
So it's and to the second point really is start small. Start with single step internal automations. Don't send external emails to clients automatically in your first day. You're likely to embarrass yourself. Start with internal automations and let your team members go, why did you send me that? And then go and correct and build and learn the system, right? The other thing I'd say is run the manual method for a while first. Lots of people jump in and go, oh, great, exciting, I can do this. And they automate something that either doesn't need really to be automated, or they automate something and it's a real struggle to get it to work right. If you do that manual process for a few weeks or even months or whatever, and then you go, right, I'm doing this thing the same way every single time, and it's costing me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Let's look at automating that now. And when you then go to automate, you know exactly what you want it to do. And it's far more likely to work. The other thing I'd say is writing down your automation first in a sentence. So, open a Google Doc, Word doc, whichever one you're on. Write that automation down in a sentence.
Pipedrive Note is also available.
yeah, exactly. Put it down in a sentence. And what this helps to do is to get the conceptual idea of the automation very straight in your wording. And you can go back and read it again and check it, and maybe check it off with somebody else. Then when you go to actually build it, it's much, much easier to think about a trigger, a condition, and an action. And you'll build it better. I promise you. Even better still is to use something like Miro to draw the automation out as a workflow map. And I'd always recommend everybody workflow maps their systems. We spend more time workflow mapping people's systems than we do anything else.
Yeah.
And that gives you a reference point also to go back to in future and say, okay, we've got these automations running. We could tweak those, add a step. This is how they affect other things. To always start slow, draw it out before you actually start building. And you will actually, it's a faster process because you won't get it wrong so many times.
Yeah. Measure twice, cut once.
Exactly. Exactly.
So top tips. What shouldn't you be doing there? So obviously, I guess what if you start slow, measure twice, cut once. I guess what not to do is go really fast and just.
Like I say, I see people create 10 automations on day one, and I find all sorts of weird things happening all over Pipedrive, and managers and CEOs come in and get very cross because funky emails have been sent to the wrong people and things like this. So. Pipedrive works brilliantly to speed up these workflows, automate all these processes, keep you timely in terms of your follow-ups, but don't embarrass yourself by rushing in, jumping in, and creating a whole load of mess for yourself and the other people in your team as well. The other thing I'd say that people do often is automate things which don't happen the same way every time. It's something that either needs personalization, or it's something that say 5 times out of 10 is exactly the same, but the other 5 it might be slightly different, or you don't want it to happen because of whatever circumstances. And so we find people automating those things and then going, it's the deal's moved again when I didn't want it to, or I sent this email to a client. This is the worst thing is sent an email to a client that I didn't want to.
Yeah, I hear a real world example of the automating moving a deal through a stage. So you finish an activity like an intro call, then automatically gets moved through the pipeline stage. And I said to my client, I said, what happens if it wasn't a positive intro call? So to your point, 5 times out of 10, it might be positive, but you shouldn't be automating those activities that aren't always the same. Exactly. And certainly test those out with internal processes. Don't test them out with external processes. But Aaron, that was super, super helpful. I always enjoy having these calls with you to kind of extract some knowledge and extract some things from the delivery team. And thank you for the listeners to listening to the Evolve Pipedrive podcast, where we talk about everything Pipedrive, sales, app, and the Pipedrive marketplace. Please like, subscribe, and share. We've got loads of really cool guests coming up soon, from Pipedrive users to some very prominent people on the Pipedrive marketplace. So, really excited to have those guys on. Brilliant. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.